So both Tyler and Josh were students of mine like forever and a day ago.
Yeah.
And Tyler left USC and went to Auburn University and became a designer and creative director for Auburn football. And Josh Josh has a really awesome story, and went through a number of different kind of sports related careers, and then went to the Charlotte Hornets. And then Tyler ended up at Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that's really awesome. So they both have a really great sports background with a great understanding of what it takes for branding very specific sports teams. And then Jenn Grady and I kind of know each other through another. Went to Kent State, and I actually graduated in her husband's MFA class. And this summer, I think it was late this summer, Jennifer wrote an article about the rebranding of the Cleveland Guardians, which I then shared with Meena, and I was like, man, this is really interesting. And it kind of sparked this whole project. It was something that we talked about for a little while and decided would be an interesting topic to try and tackle. And so that's what brought us kind of to this assignment. So that's everybody's. And Jennifer's at the University of Cleveland or Cleveland State University for graphic design. So awesome. Thank you all for being here today.
Absolutely.
Meena,
Yes, thank you. So Rachel Suding is a designer with the Miami Marlins. She is a former student of mine from the University of Louisville. Super grateful for her to be here today. Come on in if you're joining us. Actually, Rachel graduated in 2018 from the University of Louisville, from the Height Art Institute, and she and a number of other students, former students, developed a scholarship for designers, for, if I'm correct, female designers, specifically there at the University of Louisville too. So super active designer, really proud of Rachel of what you're doing. And so really glad that you and all four of you actually could be with us this morning. So thank you for your time. I'm going to go ahead and get started and ask, or just to tell you a little bit about the project that we're working on too. So we have 3 sections of this course, roughly 20 students per section. So there are a number of students working on this project. We really felt like the group of you could help to bring us into this project. We just gave this project to our students yesterday and today. They're just learning about it. They're just starting their R&D process. And they have 3 sports teams that they are looking at to rebrand with an angle on inclusivity, keeping the competitive nature of that brand, considering that the stakeholders, the client that they're working for, the stakeholders are the fans, not just the franchise and just the bosses, but the fans and the people who love those teams. So the 3 teams that they were able to choose from, or were assigned, depending, were the Las Vegas Aces, so the WNBA, the Washington football team, my home team, the Redskins, and the Atlanta Braves. And those are the 3 choices that they had. So right now they're in their process of research and discovery for those 3 teams. They're grouping up, they're starting and they're converging, and then they're going to diverge and work on their own for the rest of the branding assignment, which will take them roughly 5 weeks to complete. Okay. So this is where you come in, and this conversation really gets the ball rolling with these students and how they're starting this process. So if I could start with Jenn and just ask you about your inspiration for the article that you shared, which the students have read, that they were assigned to read that before this panel. If you could talk a little bit about your inspiration for sharing that article.
Sure. This is the thing I shouldn't say while I'm being recorded, but I think I was watching Suicide Squad and drinking a glass of wine and felt the need to write this article about the Indians changing their names. And the first line goes, it was really a post, a Facebook post, something like, you know, the Indians have changed their name and I'm relieved. And so I should confess to all of you that I am the least sports ball person on the panel or in your classrooms. I do not watch sports. I smack talk around sports with friends who live in other cities. So when the Indians were playing the Cubs, I bet a vacation on it and had to fly to Chicago to take someone out to dinner when they lost. So like all Cleveland sports fans, I have suffered by my team's performance, but I don't actually watch the teams. I read books when games are on. So it's interesting for me. I can bring 20 some years of design education history and take a look at marks that you're making and sort of talk about inclusivity. But I guess my perspective is where we come from has been gifted with these sports teams or not. And I think that the sign of the city stature sort of depends on how many teams they have. And so when we lost the Browns in Cleveland, it was a big deal, right? It felt like we were being demoted, and getting them back was a really big deal. And I couldn't care less about their games, but I'm glad we have a team. And so I think that the city's identity is a lot bound up in what the team's identities are. And that's why it was so difficult for so many years to want to root for my home baseball team and to go to an AIGA event, you know, during like World Series time and have someone say, well, I could never root for the Indians. It's a racist team name. And so as a non-sports fan, but a Cleveland fan, I always felt chagrined by the name when that became a part of the public conversation. I can also say to like the students in the room that when I see the logos, I just grew up around them. And so they just look nostalgic to me. You know, I'm not Native American or indigenous people. And so I didn't personally sort of initiate some of the responses, but I understand who's having them. And I understand how many years of discussion there's been around that. And so I'm just tremendously relieved that we're changing our name to the Guardians. If you read my article post, I talked about the Guardians as sort of a brilliant name choice because nobody in town can have a complaint about it. It's this beloved bridge. It's a beautiful like Art Deco icon. They were built by like some of the immigrants that built all of the beautiful structures in Cleveland back when Cleveland was really at its heyday. I don't know anyone that has a negative connotation with the bridge. And so it doesn't really matter if not being from Cleveland, you know what it's about. My theory is that someone from Cleveland will tell you about it. And that's the kind of kindness in the name change. I'll probably call it the wrong baseball team name for the next couple of years, even though I'm trying really hard not to.
Thanks for sharing that, Jennifer. I want to open the floor and just sort of give Tyler and Josh and Rachel a moment to react a little bit to that. When it comes to the work that y'all have done in your professional careers and working for and with these teams, do you have any response to what Jennifer just mentioned?
No, I mean, I think in general, fans, it's a really, really tricky subject to try and design for so many different types of people. And that's the sports world. You're trying to talk to fans, but fans from different generations, and with different generations come different tastes. And it's just a matter of trying to figure out what really is yours. And you kind of, in that sense, they kind of delve deep into the city to find out really what the city was about and what the people of that city really resonate with and what it stands for. And to me, I mean, the Guardians, and you're right, the name change and the brand really kind of, it really does sit well. You can't really complain about anything they've done or the name or the way that it was designed, because it just feels good. You're absolutely right. It's one of the more successful rebrands I've seen to date.
Yeah, I think I'll echo that too. You know, when teams go through a rebranding process, which I've working with the Hornets from the Bobcats, you know, we went through that phase, but then also we developed a G League brand, which is sort of the minor league of the NBA, from the ground up. We have to take all of that into consideration, right? We would have a team. We had a team in Greensboro, so there's the fan base and the people that are specifically there are, we have to do a lot of research around that and keep in mind who that fan base is. You know, there's a big inclusion factor in that. And with Michael Jordan being the owner of the Hornets, you know, we have minority owners. So there's a big push to make sure that, you know, inclusion is number one for us when I was there. So it's a lot of different things you have to take into consideration.
From my perspective, so I jumped on board with the Marlins about a year after they launched their new brand. So this is the third rebrand that the Marlins have been through. They started as the Florida Marlins in '93, so they're a pretty young franchise. And then in 2012, 2014, that they rebranded to kind of the orange and black look and feel. And then when our new ownership came in 2017, that's when they got the process rolling. So for me, it's been interesting to kind of see how fans are buying into the new look and feel. Now, we didn't have a name change, but it's just been kind of interesting to see how fans react to the new brand, even as it's 2 years into the process. And it is kind of a touchy subject around here, but I do agree with everything with the Cleveland launch. I think that was a really nice way to handle all of that. I'm actually from Ohio. I'm from Southwest Ohio, so I'm familiar with Cleveland sports, but I do think it was a nice touch to incorporate the architecture of the city, because like you said, I think that's a really great way to handle that without, you know, any real reason for complaint.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everybody, for those comments. And I want to give Jennifer some time. I just saw you want to unmute yourself. So Jennifer, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one last little bomb into the discussion because it'll make it more interesting from a design standpoint. I really believe in the name that they picked. I'm real underimpressed with the designs that came out. And I don't want to be the design police as a design instructor ever. It is no harm, no foul on the designers who worked on it. One of the things that I mentioned in my post is that it looks like death by committee to me. And so I don't know if your students have the images that came with it, but if you know what Chief Wahoo, which is the racist Indian logo mascot that we were with before, looks like, and the Indians kind of script type, which is pretty classic. When you see the stuff that they came out with for the Guardians, we've got this weird flying baseball sandwiched by G's, and the G's are very angular because the buildings that they're referencing, the bridge is really deco and angular, and the G's kind of stop the motion. The script of Guardians looks a lot like Wahoo's feather in his cap. And so I'm seeing this kind of, I would call it Frankenstein design from my years in the industry, where a room full of decision makers said, oh yeah, do this from that and that from that. And somehow it kind of got glommed together. It feels like it came out so fast. They took a long time getting to it, but when they announced it with logos right away. And it looks to me like the creative team didn't get the time that they needed, or that they were very bound by decision makers who didn't understand design. So I'm hoping the design gets a little bit better because it's not garb I would buy just yet.
Yeah, that death by committee design, I understand that well. I worked on the rebrand of the Richmond, Virginia logo, that RPA logo. And that was a really difficult and long and arduous process where everybody wanted to have a conversation and put sort of what I had said during that time. Everybody wanted to make their mark, but I think it was a little bit more crass and said P on it, because it felt like people were just having, they were just having their moment, saying, well, I want this here and I want this here. So let me ask you all, how have you seen athletic team branding change since the time you've been working in the field? And Rachel, I know that you're coming in, you are our newest you're our emerging professional, right? You are our newest designer. But we have some people on the panel who've been in the field for, I feel like, maybe long enough to be able to remark on this. How have you seen branding change since you started your career? Anyone?
I guess I'll start. So I started as a graphic designer in Auburn, and then worked in, kind of built the graphic design department up until I was a creative director at Auburn, and then went over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to be their creative director. And so seeing it from both sides, a collegiate level to a professional level, and then watching digital grow as much as it is now, you kind of see branding evolve so much further, in a sense where before you would see more, like back in 2002, you'd see more logos on shirts and hats and on a website. Now you see it on every single post, if it's on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. Every brand is developing content, and they're all developing it to the 10th extreme. They want to build their own audience, and they want to be recognized for all the achievements that they're doing on their own. And so you're seeing how a logo, which is traditionally used on its own on a shirt or a hat, and people recognize it that way. Now you're seeing it very, very small, being used on every single graphic that they ever put out. And so you're now having to adjust your brand based off of that. You can't have this very detailed, intricate logo that no one can read in a small bottom corner. So all these brands are having to figure out ways that they can make their logo, whether through a rebrand or a refresh, or introduce a new secondary word mark or something that then can be used on a smaller scale that people can recognize really quick and still have the brand significance in there. And so there is a lot more that you have to think about whenever you're rebranding, or whenever you're refreshing something. When I first started out, Auburn had 2 logos, and by the time we ended, which is in 2000, for me, it's in 2016. I think there were 4 on the table, and we brought back old logos. The traditional AU, it was maintained as the primary, and then the Tiger Eyes was phased out, and that was their secondary. And it mainly was phased out because it was too detailed and no one could distinctly tell that was Auburn. And so it evolved from basically what the demand was.
Yeah, and I'll add to Tyler's thought there. I think over time, if you look back at sports and you look at the identities that they had, there's probably 1 or 2 logos in that identity system. When we were developing the Hornets, going from the Bobcats, this development is taking 2000, I guess, 15, 16, something like that. We ended up with 9 pieces to our identity program. So we had 9 different logos, and from the primary to a secondary to a tertiary to all of these ancillary pieces that we have, and specific uses for each one of them. And so there's a lot of strategic thought that goes into why we're developing these logos, where we're going to be placing these logos, what the meaning behind each one of these pieces of identity are. So I think that as the creative idea with people in sport being a little bit more strategic in nature than what they used to be back in the early 50s, 40s, 30s, 70s, 80s. There's a lot more of a story to be told, and I think it gives people in sports that ability to tell those stories in different ways, because we have the new platforms and medias. It's not just print anymore, and it's not just a logo on the field somewhere. It is social and digital and outdoor and around the cities, and it's going to go worldwide. So there's just a lot of strategic thought, I think, that has gone into a lot of these rebrands. And I will agree with Jennifer about the Guardians on design by committee. Being on the internal of professional sports, that one was totally designed by committee. That was not, I think they, it was a great choice to make that change, but they probably could have done a little bit better.
Yeah, and I understand that fully. It's a hard thing being a designer in the sports world and hearing the complaints of the fans, but also the complaints of the designers. And it's tough because we've all, like, for me, I've been there many times, and like, to me, that is the challenge, you know, that is the absolute challenge in making sure that your brand is something that you're proud of, and you only present the stuff that you know is going to be something that's validated and vindicated, that you accept yourself. And that's something that I've definitely learned throughout. Like I used to always provide like 3 or 4 different options, and I'd always create like the one that I really liked, and then have like the second and third one. It was like, okay, you know, but it always was a mix. And so you slowly just start learning. It's like, okay, I only need to provide examples or samples that I really, really put my heart into and know that this is going to be good no matter what. And so that's where it gets a little tricky, because as designers, you want to like push towards the one that you really like, but you also want to provide like different options. But it's kind of, it's a touch and go when it comes to design by committee, and it kind of, it gets put on a designer on the back end. So it's a tough field.
Jennifer.
If I can just build on what you both just said, to the students in the classroom, the reason it's so important for you to participate in critique is because you get used to selling your ideas. It's not just that you're taking feedback or giving feedback, but you're getting really comfortable with presentation skills. So much of what we do in the success of the best work is based on our persuasive powers. And so if you also are doing a bunch of research work right now, using that research to advocate for why your design is going to be more effective, don't just show a client like, here are 3, pick one. Talk to them and steer them in the right direction. Maybe I think you're even only showing one thing, but you're talking to them about why it works and why the changes are important. And I think that that's where this death by committee thing, it happens to us when we can't advocate with the same business language and talking about ROI. And if we don't sound like one of them in the room, they think we're just sort of arbitrary art makers. I think when you can be seen as like a power part of the team, and you have really persuasive ideas that are selling the visuals, it's when design is its most successful.
Yes, absolutely. And one thing I've definitely found out through just designing different, trying to design different campaigns with brands, is providing visuals with your ideas is so crucial. So if you designed a logo and you're just presenting the logo, then let's see what that logo looks like on a billboard, on a graphic. What's your whole vision behind the logo, how it looks, how it represents the team? Because that sells itself just by one graphic. And everything can be realized based off of that one look, and it just makes sense. People really understand things when they see them with their eyes, not just internally. So that's a huge thing that's helped us out in some projects we've been on.
Yeah, I want to say that Jennifer's point there is so spot on. What you don't want to get caught into is being just a designer, right? Because everybody is I think if you're listening to us speak, you're going to be more than just a designer. If you want to be just a designer, you're going to have a basic job the rest of your life, and it's going to be boring. You're going to get told what to do and you'll be pushed around. And when you get into the real world, you really have to understand the choices that you're making when you're creating something, right? Tell that story, build that story out. Like Tyler was talking about, different areas. Don't just present the logo, but have a story built. Understand when Jennifer's talking about, talk about the ROI, talk about the business metrics. I mean, those are so vital to what you do. You might be an art student, but man, go sit into a business class, right? Go sit into a marketing class and listen to how those guys talk, because guess what? Those are going to be your bosses there for the longest time until you have figured out a way to elevate your career into a creative director position or a decision maker level position. And you have to be able to speak and talk that talk, or you're just going to be told what buttons to press. I've lived in that world of being a button pusher, and I know we all have as early creatives, where somebody's like, hey, move that a little bit to the left or move that a little to the right. It's some guy that some person that typically doesn't really know, you know, kind of our process and how we create things and the thought around it. So have a little bit of backstory for kind of what's going on.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. I couldn't agree more. Tyler, go ahead. Tyler, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was actually just saying I completely agree. I echo exactly the words he was saying, because at some point you do have to evolve from being a graphic designer into understanding how the world works and understanding how so and so is in the position they are. And when you start realizing that they're in that position because they see things from not a graphic designer's perspective, but they see things from someone else's shoes, and they're looking at their life differently and what makes them able to have that job, then now you're fully understanding how everything works in general, like how there's fan base, there's donors, there's all these parts that have to play a role in making all of this come to life, and there's different factors and everything. And so to me, it's like understanding the whole ballpark and being able to justify all of your decisions and having reasons and visuals to back it is very, very crucial. And it'll just develop you further, not just as a designer, but as a whole, as a creative, a complete creative, in a sense where you are a director and you understand how everything works.
Thank you for that. And, you know, Jennifer is mentioning some other stuff here in the chat. I want to bring Rachel into this a little bit more and ask you, you know, part of, and this is for everyone, I want to start with Rachel though, part of this project for these students is to deliver that pitch. They have to present the work. And so they have 6-minute presentations, no longer than 6 minutes. They have a particular slide order that we're asking them to deliver, you know, and we're asking them to deliver certain things. But could you, Rachel, talk a little bit about that, that part of your work when you're presenting your ideas and you're presenting your research, and, you know, anything that goes and is involved in that process, and speak to the students a little bit about that.
Yeah, so recently, actually, we had kind of a big planning meeting for 2022, just because we're trying to get the ball rolling as soon as possible since the season just ended. So we came to that meeting with mood boards. We kind of talked through our ideas, but we did have visuals to go along with them. So it helps if you have like kind of your jumping off point, like what sorts of things did you look at, did you explore to get to what you're about to show your audience. So it helps to kind of lay the foundation in that way. And then once you dive into the actual work that you've created, it kind of sets the tone for the story that you're about to tell. So I guess a good example I can provide, I got to rebrand our Marlins Kids Club this past season. We launched it in July. So when I was coming up with that, I was looking at different kind of like looks and feels of not only children's products like toys and such, but also we were trying to kind of leverage this as a cool club to join that like young teenagers would be interested in, because younger kids, they look up to the older kids, they want to be cool and whatnot. They want to be like the teenagers. So we pitched, I wish I had examples to show. We pitched these ideas with some mood boards. When it came time to actually build the logos out, we settled on a few different options, and then we built each of those options out in different little mock-ups. So we mocked it up on a lanyard, on a t-shirt, just to kind of give that context to it also.
Yep.
So all of that is really important when you're not only pitching a logo, but just a full identity, because it helps to see how far you can push it in any sort of direction that you could consider.
So going into that research, you know, what I want to know additionally, and everybody else is welcome to answer that question. But when you do, can you talk a little bit as well about the kind of research that you see that that you're talking about during these presentations? You know, there's certain research that tells a franchise to change their name or to do a rebrand, as Josh had mentioned. You know, what does that research look like? And also, as you're pitching and you're showing your process to tell the story, like Rachel had just mentioned, you know, is there anything else that you all would add to that for these students to know?
Yeah, so I think, you know, research is definitely vital, specifically when you're talking about a business change. When you're talking about like an overall brand change itself, that's a business decision. It's not just making one logo into something else. So for the Hornets, you know, it started with polling the audience, right? And how we started. Can you guys hear me? Okay. It started with sort of who's our consumer. You know, we're the Bobcats. We're below average NBA team. Attendance is extremely low. What do the fans actually want? And I think initially went out, we did a very basic newspaper poll, which is kind of crazy, right? We went to the Charlotte Observer and we say, we want to run a little bit, you know, does the team or does the city want a rebrand? Do they want to move on from the Bobcats? What do they want it to be? You know, we'll welcome some answers here, but we all knew what we wanted to go. We wanted to go back to the Hornets, and that's what the fans had been telling us forever. There was a little bit of a grassroots movement called Back Buzz City to get the Hornets name back. And when that opportunity opened up, Michael Jordan decided, you know, this is a business decision where we can grow this brand from a bottom of the NBA team to a mid-level to try to get to a high performance level team by growing attendance and sales and partnerships, and it's just revenue in general. So he knew that there would be a lot of money spent in the rebrand, but he also knew that we would probably do extremely well in a lot of those metrics of revenue. And it was right. I mean, we led the NBA that year in season tickets. We led the NBA that year in partnership dollars and in partnership, the amount of partnerships that we had, and then all these other metrics. So we had to build and figure out and identify from a business standpoint, does it make sense to spend millions of dollars to rebrand, to move on and take that next jump for that brand? So there's a lot of research that goes into the things that you have to do specifically on a rebranding level. And Tyler probably has a couple of things as well.
Yeah, I've been through a couple different kind of rebrands, not necessarily the primary logo, but campaign rebrands, absolutely. For me, and what I find to work the best is doing an internal, just for my experience and what the departments were. We did an internal kind of approach where we gathered a lot of people from different departments and gathered what their experience was with the organization, all of their ideas. They're the ones that are working the events from their different angles, whether you're at the ticket office, whether you're on the field, whether you're in a what are they called? The suites. Sorry, I went blank there for a minute. The suites, dealing with high profile people, whether you're tossing out popcorn or something. Everyone has their own eye on something different within the organization. And so really you find that you can get so many different ideas by just asking questions and asking people what really resonates with them, what made them a fan to begin with. And then you start finding these neat overlaps, and everyone tells the same story here. Well, maybe we have something that resonates with people that we've overlooked before, and maybe we dig into that a little bit deeper. So that gives us a little inspiration, a little direction. And then we just start digging into what the city really is about. That was something that I was excited to do at Tampa. We did a lot of research from the music industry. Like, I had no clue Tampa was a big grunge like rock background. I had no clue, and apparently it's a raging industry in Tampa still, and the graffiti and kind of the Cuban influence, all of it played into kind of a campaign that we did 2 years ago, and that's it ended up really launching our look the way it is now. And so I do not work for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right now, but it's the same brand that we started out with 2 years ago. They've just kept trying to elevate a little by little, but it's still the exact same, which is good. What's another thing that is neat, it's something to think about too whenever you're designing or branding. This isn't something that is just like a one-off and it's going to last a year or two. Like, this definitely needs to have the staying power, needs to be able to work on different fronts and be able to be seen throughout the decades as something that's here to stay.
Jennifer, you posted something in the chat. Yes, I was reading your mind.
I'm just kind of building on what I posted in the chat and what I've been hearing from everyone else. One of the things that I think can be overwhelming to design teams that are on tight deadlines, and especially to design students who are just getting into learning how to use research, is there's so many new tricks to learn. How do I learn them? How do I apply them? I never feel like I have enough time. And so here's where I think we can lean on partners. There's a marketing department where you're working. The marketing department pulls a lot of research content anyway. And if you talk to them, they can help you understand some of it. You don't have to do the primary research on your own. When we're designing for big institutions, and so, any kind of college sports team or college logo would count there. But I think that there are lots of foundations related to pro sports teams in their philanthropic outreach. The people who run annual giving campaigns and foundations, and they're like really understanding where money comes from, they understand a lot about culture. They understand the very top end, big fish donors and how they might approach those folks. And often those are decision makers, but they also understand how to run grassroots campaigns and how they can get an average alumni to give $20 once a year to something. And so I think if you can think about the kind of, they call it friend raising, right? There's fundraising brings in money, but friend raising builds relationships. Designers could do a lot to learn about the people skills of friend raising and then use that in a meeting. And so when we ran a studio, we wanted everyone that we were reporting to be a part of multiple meetings. So we got to know the personalities there, and we understood, who was busy and what resonated with them, what kind of language they used. So if you're going to eventually present to the president of a university a new sports team redesign, watching videos of that team owner or the president and hearing how they speak and kind of using some of their language tics back at them when you're presenting the work. It doesn't mean you have to make it part of the copywriting, but I think that you can help people see themselves in the product by really understanding the people first.
Such a good point. I want to also ask to the whole group here, these teams that, we're talking about designing for athletic teams, and these franchises are deep into the community. They've been staples for some fans and their families for generations. Personally, I'm from the Washington, D.C. metro area. I grew up with the Bullets, who are now the Wizards, and I watched that change. I'm currently watching the Redskins change with possibly more bated breath than I did in the 90s with the Bullets adjustment. But, how does a brand, and I'll use the term break here. I'm not sure if it's really breaking, so pardon me if it's not, but how does a brand break with that tradition where families have been steeped in the tradition of these teams for generations, to be more open, to be more inclusive, to shed that skin, as we've seen Cleveland do and others. When does that change start to matter? how do we go about this as designers working on teams to move forward with this? And I know this is a heavy question, but I'm sure that y'all have something to add.
I would say like, so my family is Dallas Cowboys fans. I grew up a Dallas Cowboys fan. My family, they knew the Dallas Cowboys because of, we lived in Texas. We went to a couple of their games, and we only knew of them just through living there and recognizing their brand everywhere and actually going to a game and experiencing it. And so that's how we became Dallas Cowboys fans. Now, they were winning at the time, and so that made it easier for us to be fans of them. But now we're Dallas Cowboys fans for life. That's something that took a while to create, and it's something that every fan experiences in their life, whether if they are fans to begin with. Now you're seeing a time that is way different now than it was before, from when our parents were fans of that sport, in that social media is now dictating a lot of what brand power is. And what I mean is now brands have personalities versus what the media is saying about that sport or about that brand or about that team. Now they can say it themselves, and they have an audience that they've built that can then speak up for them. And so before, you didn't really see that much. It was always a writer in a newspaper that was talking about them, or someone on TV, or if you wanted to find out a little more information, then there was maybe a writer, an internal writer, which you would have to go to their website to go find out about. And so if that was even a possibility. And so now there's so many outlets for these teams to create their own personality and their own brand. And that's where the difference is you're creating a brand that can then be personified in social media with a voice. And now you're starting to, even if, say, your mom and dad don't like the logo or the rebrand that your team is doing, now you actually have the backing of your team that explains and that can have a little bit of attitude or a little bit of personality, which then you can decide if you want to be a part of this or not. So it really does. I mean, it's kind of a hard decision for sure to rebrand and to change names or do anything like that. But typically it comes from a good space. It's coming from either like the Indians, where they felt like it was just a bad representation, and so they changed it that way, or they're coming off of a bad season and they want a refresh to get everyone excited about something new. And to me, like, these things are, when it comes to rebrands, they're exciting. And never in my mind is it something where you're going to lose your entire fan base over it. But what you can do is, from a digital standpoint, is really own it and speak your truth as a team and an organization.
Yeah, I think, Tyler, you make a great point. Remember, you're the creative, but there's also a team behind you, right? Like
Right.
Organizations are made up of a social team, a web team, a design team, salespeople, all this. So there's a voice there. There's a tone that's going to be built around this brand, and you could express that tone now through social media and through all other aspects of the organization. So when we rebranded the Hornets, we had those discussions early. Okay, what does the tone look like on Twitter? What does it look like on Facebook? What does the tone look like in stadium for the PA announcer? What does it look like for, every individual? So, or even, the ushers, how do they approach people from the tone of the Hornets? Like, what does that look like? And so there's a lot that goes into the thought process of whether it's, in my case, when I was at the Hornets, a big rebrand, a full rebrand, or, to Rachel's point, like, what's the tone of the kids club that she's creating? Because we had those same exact conversations, because that was a part of ours. We had to do a kids club. And so what does that look like? And And how do we express that to make sure that we're not going to please everybody? First off, there are going to be people that aren't going to like it. We just have to expect that. But in the grand scheme of things, you know, there's a bigger decision that's going to be made that you're probably going to make 70 to 80% of the people happy. You know, 20% will be indifferent, and then there's going to be a little bit that just doesn't like anything that you do. But that is what it is. But you can still express that through all the outlets that we have. So.
Well, oh, Jen.
Yeah, I just want to say how spot on I think the idea of tone is, and how important it is that we're thinking as full creatives. Like, you may have come to design because you really liked drawing as a kid or something. Like, something got you into this very graphic, visualized thing, but the language you use is so important. And so the tone of the copywriting, the tone of the social media posts is point on. I think there are some things that are so outside a designer's control. I don't know if your class is probably way too young to have seen the movie Major League, but there was like a whole movie about how bad the Indians were. Like, the Indians have been bad. When I was a kid, I could run around the stadium anywhere I wanted, and my dad watched the game because there was no one there. And he could like see me running in the empty stands. And so there's this history of being like the underdog that Cleveland carries around with it, and it carries through a lot of our sports teams. The best thing that Cleveland could do to get all the people who are upset about the Indians rebrand to the Guardians is win. But Cleveland's not a market that's got a ton of money to throw into things. And so whether or not we'll be able to win, it may take some time. And so I think that the creative team who's working for the Guardians now has a lot of culture building to do. We've got people who feel offended that they liked the old mascot, and they feel like everyone in Cleveland's calling them a racist now when it's just the hat they grew up with and they want their hat. How do you kind of fold them back into things? How do you start new traditions based off of the old traditions, but with new names? And that's the stuff that I think as creative professionals, it might not be what you're trained to do. You might be a great logo maker, but you have to think about the whole brand and the storytelling that you're doing. And there's such opportunity to kind of come up with some creative ways to build new culture.
How do you start new traditions? That's such an important question. That's a wonderful place, I think, even to pause this conversation. And I want to ask, I'm not sure if students are going to have some questions, but I do want to ask preemptively for the students that are watching, if each of you has any advice for them. In particular, if a student is interested in becoming a designer for an athletic team, or a designer that's running their own agency or their own freelance business, or if they're just trying to get out there at the very beginning of their career, I wonder if each of the four of you could give a little bit of advice. If you wanted to maybe start with Rachel, I see some students in here like nodding at what they want to hear. Rachel, you graduated in 2018. You're fresh, right? So
yeah.
What kind of knowledge, wisdom could you impart?
So what really kind of got me into this field was I found an internship with the local minor league baseball team, the Louisville Bats. And I hadn't really thought about working in baseball in particular. I knew I wanted to kind of work in the world of athletics in some way, but I always thought it would be for like Nike or Adidas, kind of designing apparel. I had never really considered, oh, I can work for a team and be part of the creative services department for an actual team. So I found this internship, and it kind of just launched me into this world. And as I was, on the job and learning as I went, I was like, wow, I love this. Like, this is what I want to do. So I just put a lot of effort into that internship. I tried to connect as much as possible with everyone in my office, because it was a pretty small office. There were about 30 full-time employees. And then as I got closer to graduation, I kind of expressed the interest in wanting to stay on full-time to my boss. And he helped make it happen for me, because I had kind of been advocating for myself as I went, and, making sure to, connect with everybody in the office so that, they saw my interest in it. And it ended up working out. And then as I kind of went through a couple years, I was like, well, I've kind of hit my ceiling here. I don't feel like I'm growing as much as I want to be growing here. So I started applying for jobs in Major League Baseball because that was, kind of the path I wanted to go down. And I applied for, I think, 10 different positions, interviewed for 3 of them, and then landed with the Marlins. So I think in terms of getting into this field, it's pretty competitive with how many people want to get into it. But I think as long as you're persistent, as long as you understand your own design philosophy and how you want to apply that to the team you want to work for, I think that's a really important kind of piece of the puzzle to go in with when you go into interviews. So I think just kind of tailoring, what helped me out was being able to kind of tailor my portfolio to that, but also, showing that you're passionate about it, but also that you can kind of explore a breadth of different work, because in this industry, you do kind of a wide variety of work across the board, anything from like internal identity development to print pieces to digital. It's just all across the board. So I guess kind of just be prepared to show your breadth of work, and just really go for it. Don't get discouraged if you come across rejections, because they do happen, but just, get up, keep going, and you will get there.
That's great advice. And I remember your internship and how you would dovetail some of the work in your classes to the work that you were doing there to continue to beef up that portfolio and really position yourself in a place of power, to say, you guys need me, you guys need my voice. So that was a really strong move, a really big power play, Rachel. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler.
Oh yeah. So my biggest thing I always look for and really advocate for is just being completely passionate in the direction you're going. That's something that's always been a driving factor in my decisions for hires and going to the next position. For me, I've always been passionate about sports, and not necessarily watching sports, but playing them and being involved in it. And so to me, like, it seemed like a fun idea, and creating was always a huge passion of mine. And so it just went hand in hand. And whenever you're following something that you're really passionate about, then it never feels like you are a slave to your job. Like it literally just feels like you're happy doing what you do on a day-to-day basis, and then you get to enjoy your weekends and nights still being happy. And so to me, I've always kind of followed that, and I'm even following it today, where like I said, I do not work for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. My wife and I decided to quit our jobs 2 years ago, and we are traveling around the world, and we've been traveling for the past year. And that has opened up so many different things in my life to be able to create still for other sports teams, but also just create for ourselves. And to me, as long as you are completely following your passion, then it'll never not be worth it. It'll always work out for you in the end. And that's something that I've really, really discovered these past 2 years. Now I've always, when it comes to like hiring and what we look for in people starting out, it's definitely internships are absolutely crucial in the sports world, because it is the entertainment industry, and it is a field where you have a lot of people wanting to do what you're doing, and be a part of it. But that's not to say that these internships aren't paid. We at the Buccaneers and at Auburn, we absolutely did paid internships, and that's where the industry's going. It has to keep up with the demand and actually getting talent. And I would absolutely expect you guys to, if you're looking into getting internships, then start with organizations that do pay, because they are the ones that are ahead of the game and they have a little bit more resources, and that you'll find that their organizations are a little bit more, I guess, established for taking on a team versus not to say that the organizations are bad if they don't. It's just sometimes they're starting out and they're evolving, and if you want to be a part of that, and you're going to get thrown into the mix, and they're going to ask a lot of you, which is good. It's a portfolio builder, but it's a lot of fast-paced work at the same time. So I would definitely try and focus on trying to find a paid internship. And then really, whenever you get into the sports industry, it's all just grinding in terms of really being proud of the work that you're putting out. If you, at the end of the day, have put hours into one piece that you don't know if it's gonna be seen by a lot of people, like, what you can be assured of is that you put your all into it, and it's something that you can say is completely yours at the end of the day, and you can always put it in your portfolio and use that as a piece down the road, and be thinking of that in all your pieces. Like, these are things where you're representing the team, but really you're representing yourself in whatever you put out, and you're representing your creative ability, which no one else has. No one else has your creative ability. Only you possess that. Seriously, it's like when you dig deep into your creative process and what you can only do in your brain, no one else can do that. That's only you. That's what makes creative so powerful, is you get to express your own thoughts on whatever medium you want. So I would absolutely say, approach it with as much passion as possible, and just do a little bit of research and dive into something that you really think could be fun.
Thanks, Tyler.
Yeah.
Josh.
Yeah, so advice for you guys, a couple pieces. So I have sat in your chair, literally sat in that room, right, that you're in, and gone from a very low paying graphic designer job, very bored and not excited, and then figuring out a plan for my career and my life on where I wanted to go. And I knew that I wanted to be the creative director of a sports franchise, and I made goals for myself throughout my career and how I could get there. I came up through the ranks of sports in equipment. So I worked for a fishing company, I worked for a tennis company, I worked for a golf company, I worked for Dick's Sporting Goods, and that sort of built my path into how I got the Hornets job. And now that I sit in a position, I'm the director of marketing for the lottery, where I do have a creative team that's underneath me, and a whole marketing staff and PR staff and all that fun stuff. There's different sort of levels here so for sports. If you really want to get into sports, be prepared to work, right? Because somebody else, the person next to you, is going to work harder than that, and you have to expect it. So practice. Design things that allow you to follow that passion, like Tyler was sort of talking about. If you want to design in sports, but you have a graphic design job of putting used cars together for a newspaper ad, when you go home or in your free time, design sports all day long. So I've hired people, when I was at the Hornets, I've hired designers that had no sports background, but in their free time were able to just design a bunch of sports items and really make it from a business side of it. And they understood, they would, whether they're doing rebrands for themselves, imaginary rebrands for other teams, they're building out different sports graphics. You have to have that conversation and be able to say, yes, I do work for this, but I really want to get into sports, and here's my sports work. Here's what I can do. So just continually design stuff that you want to work for, and talk and have that ability to talk about those when you're in those interviews. And the other thing is, seriously, go sit into a marketing class, go sit into some business classes, understand how these people are talking. There's the only way that you can sort of move that career up from being just a button pusher or a designer. You have to understand the decisions that you make as a creative, not just designing a graphic or designing a sales sheet or what have you. Understand why you are creating that sales graphic, why you have created, the kids logo, the story behind that. You have to work on presentation. I know Jennifer was talking about it earlier. Go to a public speaking class. I was horrible at public speaking when I started. I was so nervous to stand in front of one other person and talk about the passion of what I was creating. It helps you. That pitch is going to help you become a better creative. One of the hardest things I had to do was pitch to MJ, right? Like once you've pitched to MJ, there's no other public speaking scenario or pitch that you ever have to worry about. Not everybody has that option, right? So I really had to gain confidence in the ability to speak about my work and my team's work and everything that we're doing. So, learn the language of what business people are talking about, understand the decisions that you make, and then just continually design around your passion to get into what you want to do.
Great advice. Jennifer, you started this whole mess. You know that? We started this whole thing. Stephanie texted me, emailed me, and she said, hey, you got to take a look at this. So I think it's really important that we end with you.
Okay, well, I'm going to end with my best advice, which two parts. One, I want you to be better storytellers. I think you get to be a better storyteller by eating a lot of the things you like: TV, movies, reading books, anime, like you name it, it's going to teach you something about storytelling. Every piece that you make in school that you're going to put into a portfolio, I want you to think about the story when you present it. How you write about it if it's being presented without you behind it, but how you would sell it when you were in a meeting with someone. And I want the story of that piece to not just be about the project, but to be about you, the designer. So do you want to tell me about how you embrace new technology? Do you want to talk to me about your illustration skills? Do you want to talk to me about your copywriting or photography skills? There's something of you in each of those pieces. And by the time you're done showing me 5 of them or 10 of them, I'm going to understand who you might be as a hire. It's really important to, as part of your storytelling, help me understand how you work, because I expect to see good work in your portfolio if I'm going to hire you or if I'm going to connect you with a job. Like there's like a base level, like go out on Behance and look at other portfolios. You'll know if you're like up to par or not. But how you talk about your work, how you talk about doing group work. So I might tell how you work with other people. If you can point to the parts you had on a particular project and talk about how you collaborated, and even showing me like sketch work and developmental work and research and talking to me about how you got from that generation to the end product. Storytelling, really important. The last piece of advice is it's all about the people. Right, so Stephanie sent me a message, and I remember Stephanie from grad school, even though I think I was like a year or two ahead. And so, of course, I responded and said, yeah, I'll come talk to your class, right? Almost every job or professional opportunity I've had is because I knew somebody who connected me with it. And it's one of those things I didn't understand when I was in school until I started doing like internship style work or getting out there as a young professional. So learn it now while you're in school. Like, all the people sitting around you in the classroom, including your professors, or your first network. And think about like the uncle that you have that works somewhere cool, and your neighbor down the street that might work for a company. When you start job hunting, like think about all the humans that you have been a good human back to for all this time, so that you're not asking for a favor without having given something in advance. And I think if you keep up your networks, like join AIGA, join the Art Directors Club, like whatever is out there, ad agency groups, go see the local Addy Awards, like get to know people in the fields you want to break into, and you will have an easier time breaking into them.
Thank you so much for that. Jennifer, Josh, Tyler, and Rachel, we have kept you 7 minutes past the time that I promised we would end. So with respect to your time, we want to thank you all so much, and we really, really appreciate your time, sharing your wisdom, and spending this moment with us this morning and this afternoon. Thank you. Thank you so much again. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank
Guys,
you.
can I say one thing real quick before we leave?
Yeah.
I think the Braves is a great thing to look at. Guys, go look up In-Sung Kim. He's the creative director at Atlanta. I think you guys know him. He's amazing.
I love In-Sung.
Yeah, he's an awesome dude. He really is, and he's trying very hard, and I'm pretty sure they've already successfully taken off some of their logo pieces of their identity because of this discussion, right? Like, go look him up, go look up his work, follow him. His stuff is so good. He's so far ahead of this discussion. It's not even funny. And I'm glad that the Braves have him.
And,
For sure.
and the name again, say the name again.
In-Sung Kim.
Okay, we're gonna write that down.
Mhm.
All right, everybody, thank you so much. Thank you. Have a great day.
All right,
Thanks,
thank you guys
Thank
too.
you.
Appreciate it.